Welcome to Ace Lite Halloween 2022. Enjoy. Howdy indeed. That was Cascade off my album, but scarier. That's how I chose to open things here tonight. I got a few other things on the set list before we get to all the improvisational stuff after. But there is gonna be just a tiny bit of improvisational stuff in there as we go. I like that one. Some of that was improv. Yeah, the preparation this time was not as much. Oh well, here we are. Alright, this next one is a song I haven't played before. I guess consider this a first attempt at it. From the game Ikenfell, Rose Thorns. Thanks for the good luck wishes, but based on your earlier comment, I'm just gonna keep an eye out in case anything inappropriate happens. But if that's avoided, then that's great. Anyway, yeah, Ikenfell. Great little indie game with good representation, nice mix of tactics, an RPG. If you haven't played it before, it's not the shortest game, but it's also not the longest game, and it's out there on any platform. Might still be on Game Pass. I don't remember it coming off of Game Pass. So I'm pretty sure it's still there. But yeah, decently scary fight that occurs during the game there. With a song to match it. Let's see. I only have a couple more ready to go. I guess there's not much keeping me from getting straight to them. So, on to the next one. Here is a reprise of something from the YouTube channel. We'll be taking the requesty stuff after I get through the main set list, so stay tuned for the post show. I got a couple more to go before we get there. So, yeah, next up, a little reprise from the YouTube channel if you've seen it there already, but I'm gonna riff on it a bit more here because it's live. This is from SpongeBob SquarePants, Battle for Bikini Bottom, the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. Now, if you want to pop in a request for later and check out the VOD, all I can promise to do is attempt it. I can't necessarily perfect it, but if you got something, just in case you can't stay the whole time, then I'll hear you out. Anyway, that was Battle for Bikini Bottom. Once again, just in case anyone trickled in the middle of that, that was, of course, from a SpongeBob game. But the Flying Dutchman section. Man, I love that area as a kid. Maybe not the wall jumping so much, but the music for sure. Alright, I got 2 more on the set list for tonight before we switch over to improv and requests. So, get straight to it. Another cover that I put out on the channel at some point and will be attempting to spookify a bit more tonight is from the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Or just the original Great Ace Attorney if you're in Japan, I guess. Eric Van Zieks, Reaper of the Old Bailey. May the Reaper bless us on Halloween. Alright, to cap off the main set list of the night, we are. You probably expected me to revisit the song that I wrote last year for Halloween. And you'd be correct. I am going to try to make it different enough, though, especially because now that my album is out, I can get copyright stricken by myself. So, if I make it different enough, they won't catch me copying myself. Isn't that great? That's the true demon. So after this song, we will be going over the 5 tips to make your own music nice and spooky for the season, and then going full improv in the post-show. Alright, here we go. Monstrous Souls 2022 edition. Alright, thus concludes the main 5 sets of songs that I had for today, but within those songs were certain elements that made them nice and spooky. And so this was from a request from a friend when I put out the call for Halloween ideas on Twitter. And so he suggested that I do another little seminar. See, back in January, I did an overall view of how I compose music from the ground up. That was just a little rough overview. But for tonight, what makes music in general, including the stuff that I just played, spooky? You're trying to make something spooky. What are, like, I don't know, 5 tips to start out? And we'll be going through those now. Welcome to Making Music Macabre. Now, of course, that was a trial title. You should have seen the other titles that came before this. Let's see, there was Suggestions for Spooky Songs, or Tricks for Terrifying Tunes. What else did I have? Oh, God. Nope, I lost the joke. I had a third one, I swear. Ooh, Take Tone to Terror. Okay, so anyway, there's lots of alliterative things that you could use, but I went with this because, I don't know. Just remember, people. Alright, this will be briefer than the January seminar, because I do have it boiled down to these 5 tips, and I brought slides, and each one of these has a terrible pun name. So look right there in the top right of your screen if you want to follow along. Tip number 1. This is mostly for the beginner types who don't really know how to get started in the first place. And to a lot of musicians, this is going to be the obvious tip, but you know what? I am accommodating a wider audience. So, there are 2 types of keys, major and minor. You're going to have a much easier time composing something scary if you start in the minor key, aka that's your minor key to success. It's weird that I have to point at the ceiling in order to point at the slide. I'll get used to it. So, major keys are very typically happy keys. Like, here's a major key right now. And here's another one, just for the full picture. Alright, there's 2 examples of major keys. You can see how easy it would be to make those types of keys sound much happier. Whereas, here are the minor keys for those same chords. There you go, audible difference. I played practically the same thing in the 2 different keys, so you be the judge for yourself. Using some of the additional tips that I will provide, I don't think it's impossible to make a major key sound scary. You can certainly do that, but I think that takes a bit more doing. So if you need an easy entry point, just find the minor key. And yes, of course, minor keys alone will not make the song scary. Why, I've got 4 more tips. Ready for the next one? Number 2. Number 2. It's time for you to put in your good intention. Alright, scariness is about building the tension and the suspense and keeping the listener on edge. And there's a few ways you can do that with music, but it will typically come down to a bit of back and forth between the notes and a bit of holding in some places, maybe even allowing for brief silences here and there, so that when the music comes back, it's got more of that punch. So, yeah, I'm just gonna play a couple notes back and forth in what's called a tremolo. So, there you go. That's one example of suspense. I use that one in Monstrous Souls, not the tremolo specifically, but I do go back and forth. So, yeah, there's usually some back and forth happening there. The other thing to keep in mind about creating the tension with the back and forth is that scary songs usually rely on you taking these things called half steps or half tones in one direction. So, right now, if I go from, let's say, what's a good example of? Okay, so let's say I'm playing in the key of G minor. So right now, the third and fourth notes are B flat and C. We would say those are one tone apart. You might be able to create some tension going back and forth between those two, but you have this B in the middle of them that is not currently being used because it's not part of the G minor scale. So, it being directly between them, that is a half tone. Go from B flat to B, or from B to C, if you're in that specific key. That's just one example. So, if I go between B flat and C, while I'm in that key, it's going to sound like this. Which, hey, actually, not bad, right? Still has some tension in there. But now, I am going to avoid the C key and show off the B flat to B with the exact same key. And so it sounds just a little more off because that B does not belong in that scale, typically. Right? We're breaking the norm. We're trying to make the listener feel a bit more at unease. Now, if you keep that up for too long, it just gets irritating. But having bits of that throughout the song certainly helps. Alright, so yeah, tension. And again, those back and forths are just one way to create tension. Another way is to just be like, I'm gonna stop for a second. So you could hold notes, you could stop and let the echo take over and wait for the right moment to bring things back in. But again, that key is like creating some sort of sense that someone is on edge. And now into tip number 3. This is where we're going to pitch your idea to the board. There is no board, this is not Shark Tank, but Yeah, the key word there is pitch. So, once you've decided how to create tension, whether that's going back and forth, holding things, pausing, using a series of increasing notes that doesn't ever reach a conclusion. Sorry, I forgot to include that in the last section, so squeezing that in there. But you've picked some form of creating tension, but you still don't feel like your song is fully spooky yet. So there's me using the last tip. One thing that can contribute to spookiness is going extreme in the direction of the pitch. So, in the songs that you heard me play, you probably saw that I was deliberately, spreading myself. There was extreme bass and extreme high pitch. And, like, just the sheer distance between those, it has this effect. A lot of listeners will get more creeped out by that. So, now let me do that with really big bass. Okay, I also slowed it down a bit and used some pausing to create more tension. Now let's try in the extreme high case. Each of those sounds decently creepy in a distinct way. There's merits to both. There's also merits to both simultaneously. So if you need that extra oomph, play around. Do you like it high? Do you like it low? Do you like it both? Or were you perfectly content in the middle and you don't need that extra bit of pitch? Up to you. But something to consider. At number 4, let me tell you about music theory and its diminishing returns. That's a pun. It doesn't actually have diminishing returns. Although I guess it kinda does. If you use this next tip too much, it might start to feel formulaic, and then maybe you won't like it as much. But maybe it does have diminishing returns. But the pun here is I'm going to tell you about something called the diminished triad. Yay. So, if you keep a song in a minor key without really working in some of those extra keys that don't belong there, then you might be looking for a way to create something called... Wait, is that the last tip? It is. Never mind. You might be looking for a way to, like, spice things up, make things seem scary. So, what a lot of existing scary songs do is incorporate a chord called the diminished triad. As an example, this actually comes up in... Which song did it come up in? It came up in the Battle for Bikini Bottom song, believe it or not. So, the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard, which I played earlier, is in the key of A minor. And hey, they chose a minor key. They had a really good starting place. But what they did to make something a bit more eerie is rather than go on a typical A minor journey and use chords in the A minor scale, they were like, that's kind of good, but it wasn't enough. So they added a diminished triad. So in the A minor scale, well, first I should go back over the tones. In any scale, there are 7 tones that belong there, and then the rest of the notes don't usually belong there. Now, for A minor, this is a very convenient key to talk about because it's all the white key. For both C major and A minor, actually. Those are the 2 cases where it's just the white ones. Don't use the black ones if you're staying in that key. So a scale would sound like this. So you get the 7 tones, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Wow, this key is even more convenient to talk about than I thought because the tones are in alphabetical order. Woo! So, if you never left that, that'd be fine for some songs, but you're trying to make the creepy song. So, what happens, the A minor chord uses the 1st, 3rd, and 5th tone, as most do. That's A, C, and E. A diminished triad is taking that chord and lowering the 1st and 3rd tone by a half tone. So instead of A, I go down half a tone to A flat. And notice that key is not normally in the scale because that is a black key. As for the C tone, that goes down to B because that one is a half step away. Even though it's also a white key, there is no black key in between them. And that's how the song goes from A minor to E major. And that's how they get this effect. So yeah, if you incorporate a diminished triad, you are basically constructing a theoretical scary song. So if you're big into music theory, then there's an approach for you. As I said, if you start seeing through the formula, then might not do it as much for you. But for those just starting out, it is certainly a formula to consider. And thus, the final tip, which is more of an overall tip that plays around with the first 4. Final tip is for you to really discover dissonance. This one's not so much a pun as it is the fact that both words start with the same 3 letters. So, dissonance is what makes the listener uncomfortable. When I said earlier, you can stay in the key as long as you don't choose any tones that are outside of it, like, that's the moral of the story here. If you want to create something creepy, you need to venture outside the comfort zone of that scale. So for A minor, that means that scale usually only uses the white keys. The song will sound fine, but it might not sound as scary. Start incorporating some black keys, whether that's with the diminished triad or not, and it will sound off. It obviously takes some experimentation because the thing about dissonance is you have to be intentional with it. I can start playing stuff that doesn't belong together, but it might just sound like a mess. In fact, let me play some random keys right now. That didn't sound too great, did it? Sounded like a little kid banging on the piano. So, yeah, you need to experiment and think, let me try using this key that doesn't normally belong here, and see if it fits at this point in the song. So, now let me try and play around with it and see if I can find something I like. So I tried to be sparing with it, occasionally incorporating some of the black keys in a scale that doesn't normally have it. And hopefully by being sparing, I was a bit closer to creating something that could work as a scary piece, compared to just banging around randomly. And so, as I mentioned earlier, starting in a minor key is a great starting point. Like, it's gonna give you an easier gateway of entry. But if you did want to turn a major key into something creepy, applying these other tips, especially dissonant, is going to be the way to do that. Leave the comfort zone of that key from time to time, possibly using a diminished triad if you so wish. And of course, back to tip 3, play around with the effects. How high or low do you want the pitch to be? How much reverb do you want to give the song? Like, is it nice and echoey, like Dark of Night? Or is it more stilted and staccato, which is creepy in its own way? So many decisions are left up to the creatives behind the songs, but those are my 5 tips for, making music macabre. So, happy Halloween! Hopefully you have enjoyed this main portion of Ace Lite Halloween 2022. I will now be transitioning to the post-show for the live audience, where it's going to be a lot more improvisational and request-focused. If you're into that sort of thing and you're watching this VOD on YouTube, head over to the Twitch, where I do this semi-regularly. But thanks for watching. This is where I'm going to end the recording.